Hey guys, Christine here. Today we'll be working on our ingredient inputs on our form. We're going to make them dynamic so you can add or remove ingredients as you need them. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, now we're on the last big feature in our form, the ingredients section. We want the user to be able to click Add Ingredient button and see a new input fields appear so that they can list as many ingredients as they need. Let's go step by step. First, let's go back into our HTML file. Scroll to the part of the form that comes after dropdowns, but before instructions. Right here, we're going to insert a new section header for ingredients. So type out an H4 tag, ingredients, and then the closing H4 tag. Next, let's add the button that users will click to add the new ingredients. Right below the ingredients header, type an opening button tag with an ID equal to, quote, add ingredient, and a type equal to, quote, button. Then give it some text, add ingredient, and then add the closing button tag. Now we need a place to hold the ingredient inputs as they're added. Above our button, let's give it an opening div tag with an ID of ingredients, and then right after, close out that div. This empty div will serve as a container. Every time the button is clicked, we'll add a new input inside of this div. Now scroll down to the scripts tag at the bottom of your form. We're going to add some JavaScript that runs when the Add Ingredient button is clicked. First, let's grab the button from the page. So type out document.getElementById, parentheses, quote, add ingredient. Now add an event listener to it. After the parentheses, dot add event listener, parentheses, quote, click, comma, parentheses, arrow, curly braces. Let's press enter and start building what happens when the button is clicked. First, we're going to create a container that will hold a single row of inputs. So let's type out const new input container equals document dot create element, parentheses, quote, div. This will create a new div element which we'll use to hold our inputs. Next, let's give it a class name so we can reference it later when we need to. So type out new input container dot class name equals, quote, ingredient line. And let's style it so the inputs go side by side and not stacked vertically. So let's add this line. New input container dot style equals, quote, display colon flex semicolon gap colon 10px semicolon margin dash bottom colon 10px semicolon, and then end the quote. Now let's attach this container to the ingredients section of our form. So let's type out document dot get element by ID, parentheses, quote, ingredients dot append child, parentheses, new input container. Nice, we've got the container ready. In the next part, we'll add the input fields inside of it and then make them dynamic. Each ingredient will need 3 fields: amount, measurement, and name. So let's get started with the amount field. Type out this. Const one input equals document dot create element, parentheses, quote, input. Next, let's give it a name so it can be referenced later when we collect the data. So let's type out quan input dot name equals, quote, quan. Then we'll give it a placeholder. This is the text that will show up inside of the input before the user types anything. So let's type quan input dot placeholder equals, quote, amount. Finally, let's add this input into the container we made earlier. So type out new input container dot append child, parentheses, quan input. Nice, that's our first input done. Go ahead and copy all 4 lines we just wrote, and then paste them twice. In the first copy, we're going to update the variable name and the input name to measure input. Then we're going to change measure input.name equals measurement, measure input.placeholder equals measurement, and update the append child line to measure input. In the second copy, we'll do the same thing, this time for ingredient name. So const name input equals document.createElement input, name input.name equals name, name input.placeholder equals name, and then change the append child line to append name inputs as well. Let's take a second to save our file and then go back into our spreadsheet to try it out. When I open my form, it's clear right away that something is wrong. It kind of looks like my button isn't closed properly and the rest of my form is now a button. So when I check my code, I see a few typos that I need to fix. First, I have an extra S on my event listener for add ingredient. I've also forgotten the closing tag / on the button tag for add ingredient. And I forgot the L in style on new input container. After I fix all those errors, I save my work and check my form again. Everything is all working properly and I see all 3 input fields appear in a row when I click add ingredient. But right now, they are a bit too long and going off screen. So let's fix that by changing the width that each field takes up. Find where you created the quant input and add this. Quant input dot style equals quote max dash width colon 15% semicolon end quote. Now we can just copy this and change it for measure input. So copy paste and then change it to read measure input dot style equals max width colon 15%. And the name input, we'll copy and paste it again. And this time we'll give the input just a little bit more space. So let's type out name input dot style equals max dash width colon 30%. That should give each input enough room without crowding the form. Let's hit save and test out our form again. Let's open back up our form and click add ingredient. Now the inputs should fit in the space much better. Let's finish this off by giving the user a way to remove a row if they make a mistake. So let's create a remove button. Hop back into the HTML file and go back into the add ingredients event listener. Start typing const del button equals document dot create element parentheses quote button. That creates a new button element. Next, let's give it a label so users know what it does. So let's type out del button dot text content equals quote remove. Then give it a type so it doesn't accidentally submit the form. Type out del button dot type equals quote button. Now add the button into the container along with the inputs. Type out new input container dot append child parentheses del button. Alright, now we want something to happen when this button is clicked. So we're going to add in a click event listener. So type out del button dot add event listener parentheses quote click comma parentheses arrow curly braces. Inside of the curly braces, we'll remove the entire row. So type out new input container dot remove parentheses. Let's try it out. Let's save our work and then go back into our spreadsheet and open the form. Click the add ingredient, fill in the fields, and now click remove, and it should disappear. Now that we've built our dynamic ingredient entry section, we need to make sure that the data is being saved when the form is submitted. But here's the catch. We don't want to save the ingredients to the same place as the rest of the recipe. Instead, we'll send those to a separate sheet, just like how our tables are set up. So let's start by prepping the spreadsheets. Go into your Google Sheet and click the plus sign at the bottom to add a new sheet. Rename this sheet to Testing 2. This will be the sheet where our ingredients are stored, and our original testing sheet keeps our recipe details. Now let's go back into our HTML form and scroll down to the script section. Find the event listener that runs when the form is submitted. The one that starts with document.getElementById recipeform.addEventListenerSubmit. Inside of this function, we already have code that collects the form fields and sends them to AppScript. We're going to add a new block right before Google script.run add recipe line. Let's talk about what we need to do. We want to collect every ingredient row the user created, grab the values inside, turn each one into an array. That way, we end up with a list, or more technically, an array of arrays, where each subarray holds one ingredient's details. So let's start by building it. So type out const ingredients equals. Now we're going to use a query selector to find every container that has the class ingredient line. So type out capital A array dot from parentheses document dot query selector all parentheses, quote, dot ingredient line. This gives us an array of all the ingredient rows that were added. Now we want to loop through these and extract the inputs. At the end of the line, type dot map, parentheses, container, arrow, curly braces. Now inside of the curly braces, we'll grab all of the inputs in that row. So type out const inputs equals container dot query selector all parentheses quote input. Then let's turn that into a proper array, since query selector all gives us a node list. So type return capital A array dot from parentheses inputs dot map parentheses input arrow input dot value dot trim parentheses. So let me explain what we're doing here. We're looping through each input, we're grabbing the value, and we're trimming it to remove any extra spaces. Great, now our ingredients is an array of arrays. Let's update our google.script.run line so that we send the ingredients to the code.js file. So find the line that says google.script.run add recipe, parentheses recipe, and change it so that add recipe, parentheses recipe also has comma ingredients. Now switch over to the code.js file so that we can update the function that handles this data. At the top of your add recipe function, let's change the signature to accept new ingredients parameter. Change the const add recipe equals parentheses recipes to const add recipe equals parentheses recipe comma ingredients. Now let's create a new variable to reference the second sheet we've created. Type out const ing sheet equals spreadsheet app dot get active parentheses dot get sheet by name parentheses quotes testing 2. Now we want to go through each set of ingredient values and write them to the sheet. So let's type out ingredients dot for each parentheses ing arrow curly braces ing sheet dot append row parentheses ing. And that's it. Let's try it out. Let's save our work and then go back into our spreadsheet and open the form. Open your form and fill in some recipe info. And then add a couple of ingredients. And then hit submit. Now we need to go back and check our spreadsheet. In the testing sheet, we should see the recipe info. And on the testing 2 sheet, we should see our ingredients. There's just one small thing left to fix. Right now we can't see which recipe each ingredient belongs to. So let's go back into our code.js. Inside of the ingredients.forEach loop, right before we append the row, let's add the recipe name to each ingredient. So type out ing.push, parentheses, recipe, square bracket, quote, name. This adds a fourth item to the row, the name of the recipe, so we can connect each ingredient to its parent recipe. Save your script and test it out one more time. Submit a recipe, add some ingredients, and check out testing 2. Here we're running into an issue where our ingredient name is getting mixed up with our recipe name. So let's fix it by giving a different variable name to our ingredient name. Go into your HTML file, scroll into your script file, and find where we're giving all of the name inputs a name of, well, name, and change it to ing name. Click the save icon and go back into the spreadsheet. Then open the form and let's give the recipe a test name. Let's go down and add an ingredient. I'll do 1 cup milk. Save the recipe and let's go check to see if it worked. And there we have it, bug fixed. Alright guys, that is our dynamic inputs done for our ingredients. In our next video, we're going to give some more structure to our form so things look better in rows, and we're going to clean up our sheet a little bit at the end. If you found this content helpful, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye now!